Welcome everyone, and thank you again for being here, especially this late in the day with the clouds rolling in. It's great to see you all, and thanks for being here at the Center for Personalized Health. I'm Kelly Schlageter, and I am the Communications and Marketing Director for the Center. And I'm here today to moderate this discussion. I'm lucky enough to work every day with these two incredibly talented and committed thought leaders in the health tech space. So we're going to talk today a little bit about trends in our industry, and also about what's on the horizon in terms of technologies that can truly transform healthcare. So let's start. We were here last year and we talked about where things were with the Center for Personalized Health. Let's just take a minute to talk about what's happened over the last year and how we progressed, Todd.
Okay. Well, before we talk about healthcare, where's Paul Leslie? Well, Paul Leslie is one of my closest friends. He's from Boston, I'm from New York. You know why I'm happy? Tell him why, Paul. All right, thank you. The Yankees are in first place. But as he likes to say, the Red Sox have 3 world championships this century, and we only have 1. So anyway, glad you're here. All right, back to healthcare. First of all, thanks for being here. Great to see all of you here. Just really 3 big things in the last year since we were together last year. We continue to go through what we call an adaptive reuse phase for this campus. Again, the whole campus, the focus is on something we call personalized health. And the fundamental concept behind it is how do we keep healthy people healthy in the first place? I mean, the healthcare system today is primarily a sick system. It's very transactional, so we're trying to really think through how do we keep people healthy in the first place with the power of science, technology, wellness, well-being, and so forth, and that's the focus of the campus. So we've done a lot of work in the last year to go through this adaptive reuse phase here, how we take these old ExxonMobil buildings and adapt those buildings for clinical research, education, technology uses. And we've made a lot of progress. You see the cranes out there, all the work that's being done. The Cancer Institute is essentially finished. It'll take about 9 months until we get patients in there, but that'll be the first big clinical activity on this campus. The Inova Clinic is right about the same time. And then very exciting for us in the last year, the progress we've made with the Research Institute. It was a major initiative between us, the University of Virginia, George Mason University, and other universities and private entities, and how we build out this Research Institute with new science, new technology, and then apply that clinically. So this is a really exciting venture for us that really has taken on some real speed in the last year between the parties. Probably the third thing that's been most significant is this whole rethinking of this campus and how we turn this campus into a place that allows it to be a real innovation and discovery center that allows us to attract the brightest men and women from around the country, around the world, to attract companies here in the life sciences, biosciences, med tech, health tech, device companies to this campus to build out what we call a virtuous ecosystem here in Northern Virginia and the greater Washington, D.C. area. So a lot of great progress has been made in the last year. The campus is really now starting to come alive and will really come alive in the next 12 to 15 months with the Cancer Institute, the clinic, and then right behind that will be the Research Institute. So a lot of excitement here within Inova. I think a lot of excitement within the community. So we're looking forward to getting this campus fully activated and what this campus, really the potential for this campus, what it can become.
Excellent, thanks. So Pete, can you talk a little bit about how you see technology enabling the vision Todd just talked about, and maybe a little bit about what kind of partners might help to enable that vision?
Sure. First off, whenever I do something like this, I like to make sure that any information that was provided in advance is accurate. And so when my bio was read and 36 years of experience was placed out there, I know that many of you are probably doing the math in your head trying to figure out how old I am, so I'll make it easy for you. I started my career at 14, I'm 50 years old, and just leave it at that. So technology is really something that provides 2 different planes of opportunity for the Center for Personalized Health. When we think about where we are in health systems and the advances that are occurring both in the operating model of health systems as well as the way patient outcomes, the reduced cost of health services, or the expansion of services can be applied, we like to source technology opportunities from the outside and bring them inside to Inova and determine whether or not they're relevant or useful. And that's just one aspect of how technology applies to ICPH. When you look at the vision that Todd and the leadership for the center had, part of it included a community-related economic development component. And so our sourcing of innovation, our sourcing and use of technology is designed to stimulate that creativity, and there's value associated with that creativity in that that helps retain the best practitioners, the best physicians, the best researchers, but it also makes us as a community leading in terms of our ability to attract, retain, and deploy technology in the community. So there's really two steps to this process. One is the external sourcing of technology, and we do that in IT, we do that in services, we do that in diagnostics, and the other is the economic development side of that. And that really is expressed in the Personalized Health Accelerator, through our seed portfolio and the education we do there.
Great. So beyond technology partners, Todd, can you talk a little bit about the other kinds of partners we're looking to attract to the campus?
Well, I think, going back maybe a little bit more than the University of Virginia partnership. Any Wahoos here? Any Wahoos? All right, good. All right, there we go. Got some Wahoos here. So I think our partnership is exciting not just because of what's going on this campus, but it's really part of a broader rethinking in Virginia about the more collaborative partnerships that need to take place between our research universities. We have oftentimes lived in stovepipes. We haven't worked particularly well with one another. We haven't worked particularly well with industry. So this partnership with UVA, it's a medical education partnership, it's a research partnership, it's a broader partnership in terms of putting other assets that are complementary to healthcare, like computational science, engineering, the Darden Innovation Lab 2.0 on this campus. And again, to think of how you build out this virtuous ecosystem, that's a clear objective of what we're trying to do with the University of Virginia. So that partnership is really critical because, as you know, assets attract other assets, and talent attracts other talent. So to think about anchor tenants on this campus, Inova, the University of Virginia, George Mason University with a presence, other research universities with a presence, having venture capital, not only our own venture capital, but other venture capital to support building out that startup ecosystem, having bioscience, life science, health tech, companies that have great analytics capabilities, because analytics is foundational to almost everything that we do in the healthcare space today. So again, we're really trying to think through what are the elements that we need to build out that virtuous ecosystem. And I think very importantly, as we think about this campus as a campus for innovation and discovery, there's a self-recognition in our part that one, we shouldn't do it, and secondly, we can't do it by ourselves. So that's the important part about the bigger planning for the campus. How do we build a campus that's very attractive to human capital to come, be here, locate here, be part of this broader ecosystem of which Inova is just a piece of, an important piece of, but just a piece of. So the partnerships are very, very important to not only our success, but also we think regional success.
Great. So all three of us came to Inova around the same time from tech. And I think have seen firsthand that healthcare has been a little late to the game in terms of embracing technology. And Pete, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the barriers you've seen to adoption.
Yeah, great question, because I think, sometimes health systems take a nod for, actually not bringing electronic medical records or electronic health records into, institutional use until, within the past 10-year period of time. The reality of it, though, if you step back and you look at health systems, they have been kind of leading edge, but more at diagnostics, more at therapeutics, more at the type of devices that are associated with medicine and the practice of medicine. And it wasn't until the institutionalization of electronic and digital related health records that the value of IT was really realized across enterprises. And when you look at hospital systems, a lot of them came together through what you would consider an industry as a roll-up process, where they were combined from multiple systems, or they were operated on a regional level, and they had a certain sense of independence. That type of structure to the organization was kind of an impediment to rolling out a uniform IT architecture. At the same time, health systems are not, when you think of net income or profitability, they're not designed, especially in the not-profit world, to be highly profitable entities. And so capital expenditures that are placed into the health systems are driven by available capital. And so there was a skinny aspect to what we're going to implement with regard to technology. Well, fast forward to where we are right now, and the computational capability that centralizing all these records provides to us, and you can actually see the importance of analytics in both disease identification and treatment patterns. So health systems are playing catch up in that regard. So I would, would look back and say it was for good reason that they didn't get there, but it was definitely underinvestment. And you can understand why, but at this point it's important to start that investment cycle and to move strongly ahead.
I do say, I think to me, there are lots of interesting trends that are taking place in healthcare today, but three that kind of stick out. One, digitization. Secondly, personalization. And third, virtualization. And the digitization of healthcare, as Pete said, really started with the whole electronic medical records, meaningful use. We have all these paper records. They're sitting on doctors' shelves, hospitals and such. So we're going to go out and we're going to incentivize providers and doctors to actually digitize their health records. Well, great idea, but probably not particularly well thought out in advance about the architecture and security. We put all this stuff electronically, but now people can have access to it. We really didn't think about architecture. So digitization is still working its way through, because people in the healthcare business will tell you that the optimization of our electronic medical record systems, electronic health record systems, there's still a tremendous amount of work to do to fully optimize those, to make those wholly interoperable, so that, as the panel before said, it doesn't matter where I get care, they can see my full electronic health record in my health history. So digitization, I think, is one trend. The personalization is really, it's interesting. It's two ways to me. One, people think about personalization of care around targeted therapeutics and predictive analytics, and that's very, very important, because there have been some remarkable discoveries that have been made around the personalization of medicine, precision medicine, particularly in the area of cancer. And predictive analytics, which is more focused on how we better able to predict and prevent disease in the first place. That's one aspect of the personalization of care. The other aspect is just convenience, patient experience, electronic registration. How many times you go to a physician or you go to a hospital and you got to register multiple times? You already given your information once, you got to give it twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5. It's just, you don't want to do that. So there's a personalization of care there as well that I think technology is very important. The last one is virtualization. We talk a lot about this. If you have a healthcare system, we have built big hospitals, right? So you think about, for a long time, healthcare systems, kind of the holy grail of success was how many, what we call heads and beds. How many beds do you have, right? How many beds does a hospital system have? With the presumption that all care came to a hospital. Well, if you ask our CEO, if you ask others in the industry, they're looking at 10 years and saying, what's going to happen in a hospital? It's really just an ICU, that only the sickest, most acute patients are going to be cared for in our hospitals, and that the vast majority of care will take place outside of a hospital. So then you start thinking about connectivity to the homes. You start thinking about electronic monitoring with sensor technology. You start thinking about all the things that can be done with the advancement of technology, none of which takes place in a hospital. A lot of which is really around the prevention of disease, so we can actually monitor somebody, and if we see something happening to them, physiologically they might get a text that says, we're seeing something doesn't look right, come on in or call us or something like that. But again, the point is less and less care getting done inside the actual hospital, more and more care getting done outside, and so that connectivity and how people are connected outside the hospital is going to be more important, I think, in the future than how people are connected inside the hospital.
Yeah, I just add one thing to that. And so, the opening to your question, Kelly, was, were we slow to adopt technology? And I think the answer clearly is yes. But if you look at the pace of adoption right now and the pace of technology development to be applied to health systems, it's moving along at a very, very heady clip. And one key indicator of that is the amount of money that private equity is, investing both at the venture level as well as at the more mature stages of company development to bring those technologies to fruition. It's at historical highs, so it's definitely changing.
That's a great lead into my next question, which is, so we know it's important, but talk a little bit about the level of difficulty that exists with inserting innovation and technology into a health system.
So I would say that, we just got done talking about electronic health record systems and bringing that technology to fruition. When you take a system that's as heavyweight as an Epic or a Cerner or the standard institutional health and medical records processing systems, that's the equivalent of, when in the 1990s implementing SAP financials or manufacturing, all the larger systems that were there. And everybody that's gone through that realized that, there was a licensing fee associated with that, and then there was an implementation fee that you install with that. And that implementation fee was 7 to 10 times what the licensing fee was. And it's because it was a heavy lift. It took a lot of challenges to install into the organization. Well, EMRs are no different, EHRs are no different in that structure. Clinical processes very procedural. It is regulated. It's documentation intensive. There are strict guidelines as to what physicians and clinicians can apply in terms of protocol. So taking an EHR and putting it into work is difficult for an institution. And that represents a block because that means that there's a lag in time from the time those systems are screwed into place until those procedures actually make their way out into the community and people adapt. And usually what winds up happening is that people say, well, I'm going to do what I'm doing now, only I'm going to make the system do it for me. And that means we've got to come up with a whole new series of reports that are generally offloads to the existing system. They show up in spreadsheets. It's a bit kludgy at this point. So you have this developmental process that you have to go through. Well, we're still going through that. When I say we, I mean the whole healthcare industry. It's responding to installing EHRs and EMRs and being able to integrate them in the workflow. So that's an impediment in terms of being able to bring new technology online. And what we're seeing now are a number of health systems that are saying, okay, I'm at this level, I need to get to this level before I accept any new technology and move forward. So it's a barrier that we all have to understand is necessary to reach and attain. But there is a new horizon that's created some challenge in integrating especially digital technologies into the health system, and that's cybersecurity. Within the past couple of years, the financial industry dropped to number 2 in terms of the vector for targeted attacks, and the health services and healthcare industry rose to number 1. And of course that creates a lot of sensitivity in organizational managers and those that are responsible for health records. So the protocol associated with cybersecurity is increased, and the flexibility associated with access to systems had to be ratcheted down to comply with that. So the 2 big drivers are the adoption of EHR and cybersecurity and the role that it plays in reforming the infrastructure right now.
I think I'd just add, and I think just by the very governance of how most providers are set up, the healthcare organizations are heavily matrixed, heavily distributed organizations, and I think finding the entry point is sometimes difficult, and to get that operational sponsorship for the adoption of new technology. So I think just by the very structure, the other thing healthcare too is in this industry, we can kill people, and we can't. We obviously don't want to do that, so I think there's a more risk-averse, pretty careful about adoption, because if you do something, you can seriously hurt somebody. So I think there are just some structural impediments. One of the things that we've done, very frankly, was to bring Pete and the team on board so they could really be an external interface, working closely internally with our folks in terms of taking things externally for adoption internally, either directly or through pilots or other types of partnerships. So you do have an entry point into the healthcare system through somebody like Pete Jobse, and then they can bring it into the rest of the healthcare system. So not easy to navigate. I think if healthcare systems do more of that, it will help easier navigation, so people from the outside that want to work with providers have a better opportunity to do that in a more rational and easy way.
So question for both of you. You talked a little bit about the challenges of finding the entry point even internally, but talk a little bit about an entry point for companies who want to collaborate. What are some opportunities for them to collaborate with health systems like Inova?
Yeah, so there are a couple of entry points. So if you're a product company and you're introducing a new product, I definitely want to talk to you. I'd like to know where your value proposition sits with regard to the services that we provide. I mean, there are really 3 drivers that we're interested in: how we improve patient outcomes, how we reduce the cost of healthcare as a service, and how we can expand the footprint of operations that we provide to increase the level of satisfaction with the community that we serve. So, product companies, even new service models are always welcome. I would say that, at any one point in time between Mike, Rick, myself, and our senior advisor, Mark, we've got probably 400 or 500 outstanding companies that we're combing through and analyzing in terms of what their potential, value prop could be, and how it works with, the health system. There are other areas that, from a services standpoint, make sense too. As we go through the process of expanding what we do, we find that expansion leads to, new needs and new developments. I mentioned cybersecurity as an impediment to the infrastructure as we have it right now. One of the challenges that health systems have is, if you think about the Internet of Things and the way we define it now, everything's connected and plugged in. health systems were really probably on the leading edge of the Internet of Things. We just didn't call it that. We had so many different dispersed devices that were initially not networked and then became networked through evolutions in their technology that it created a challenge for us. One area that we're seeking and looking for innovation and development is how do you manage that network from a cybersecurity standpoint, from an assessment standpoint. That's likely to continue to grow. It's easy to see how a health system starts to become what I like to refer to as the NOC, or the Network Operations Center, for all of the diagnostics and monitoring devices that the patients in the community are likely to use. And if you look at some of the evolutionary technology that's out there, if you know someone that's ever had the need to wear what's called a Holter monitor to monitor their heart rate and the signals that are produced, electrical signals that are produced by the heart, you might recognize that that's no longer as necessary to be worn. There's a new device out called iRhythm that you simply glue over your chest right where your heart is, and that through a wireless signal transmits the data directly to your provider. Those devices, as they exist in the community, need to be rationalized somewhere. That information needs to be brought in and parsed and played out there. So when we think about the evolution of health systems and the direction that we're going, especially when the community that's involved in NVTC and the work that's been done in government contracting and defense and large-scale networks, it's important to try and visualize how these advanced networks come into the future of a health system and the value of being able to trap that information, being able to use it, parse it, and get it to the right resources. So I think there are a number of areas that are relevant in terms of both services as well as products for the evolution of the health system.
Yeah, the only thing I think it's a great answer from Pete. I mean, putting aside the kind of the very high-tech device types of areas of opportunity or targeted therapeutics, there's got to be a real premium on how we reduce the cost of healthcare, just because it's not sustainable. And so when you think about how do you do that, how do you provide the right care at the right place at the lowest cost? That's kind of the value equation. So technologies that help do that either virtualize care or keep care out of the most expensive places when it shouldn't be there in the first place, I think those are going to be important just because it's not sustainable, the path that we're on. Again, there's lots of reasons for cost of healthcare. I mean, technology is great, but it's also very expensive. End-of-life care, big issue in the United States and certainly other places in the world. But we've got to find ways to drive down the cost of healthcare because we're just not on a sustainable path. And I think technology will play an important role in that.
Great, so I've got a couple more questions, but I would also like to invite the audience, if you have questions, to approach a microphone and we'd be happy to take those questions. Todd, will you talk a little bit about how you think we are well positioned in this region to lead the way in the health tech space?
Well, I think we start with, we have some great assets in this region that have been here for a while. I mean, the federal assets that are here, FDA, NIH, other federal assets that are very important to health that we have and nobody else has in the country, so I think that's a good starting place. We also have, I think, a burgeoning strength, probably on the Maryland side, more in the biohealth space. We have a large number between Baltimore and Richmond of outstanding providers. We have some great universities. And within this region in particular, we have real technology strength, particularly around networks and data analytics. And if you think back about some of the progress that's been made in the last 25 years, I mean, we never mapped the human genome without increases in high-performance computing and capacity and speed and all that made it possible to take billions of data elements and actually map something. So we have real strengths. Again, I think the information technology, analytics, and how that intersects with healthcare, I think is a great opportunity for this region as we think about health tech and biotech and being a real leader in using those analytical strengths against large data sets to improve clinical outcomes, improve quality, safety, patient experience, and then very importantly, bring down the cost of healthcare.
Great. So in the medical research area, we talk about the valley of death and how there's a great hypothesis and we get some initial funding for some research, and then there's this valley of death before it gets to the bedside, before it really impacts patient care. What are you seeing on the technology side? Where do you feel like the investment initiative and the Accelerator are able to plug into that equation?
And so, you know, the valley of death, you know, a commercialization term that really everybody recognizes is I've got my prototype, but it's not my perfect prototype. Nobody's going to buy it at the stage it's at now. I need, you know, 100, 200, maybe $500,000 to get it to where it is. It's a real problem. And, you know, the problem exists in a grand way. You know, I would say that 2018 is shaping up, and 2017 certainly was, as a record year for investing in venture class healthcare related information technology services, and with the exception of devices, which are underinvested and have been for, you know, close to 15 years now. But when you look at where that invested capital is going, it's all going in later stage venture, which is classified as venture growth, or it's going in private equity growth. And so in the earlier stages, what we term angel funding or seed funding, even pre-A, you know, it's relatively underfunded. The numbers are shifting, you know, in the wrong direction, which is an interesting dilemma, because if you have everybody that wants to invest in Series B and C and later stages, and nobody that's investing in the earlier stages, guess what's happening to the pipeline, you know? And you actually can see that right now. The price for deals that are at B and C and later stages is getting bid up and up and up, and, you know, the talk within the industry is, you know, how they may be overvalued or frothy, as they say, in terms of their valuation. We like to take a different perspective on that. When we constructed the Personalized Health Accelerator, we spent a lot of time looking at accelerator models, and, you know, one of the ones that I've been fond of was Mach 37, and, you know, our involvement in that, you know, back at CIT, was to capture the resources that this region had and try and get to a point where you could, you know, get capital to develop companies and move forward. And that seemed like a relatively useful program to attract cybersecurity companies and a lot of attention right away. When we started building the Personalized Health Accelerator, we decided we'd optimize the model a little bit differently. Ironically, instead of building an accelerator, we went back to the history of venture capital investing, which was to take projects out of the Palo Alto Research Center or out of universities and to work on 2, 3, 4, 5 of them at a time, invest your own money in them as they mature, attract other people and other capital. We think that that's one way to change how an ecosystem is developed in the earliest stages, because if you're producing a large number of companies and not all of them can have funding, then people start to worry if they're picking the right one. If you're producing a smaller number of companies, but you have a much higher success rate, then people become magnetically attracted to you because they see you as a funnel and as a pipeline that they want to be associated with. So it's our hope that we're actually jump-starting the earlier stages of investing in the area by producing a lower volume but a higher quality of companies that would come through this development process. So I'll tell you, it's a lot of heavy lifting because you have to be very engaged with these companies as they go through. But, you know, we're fortunate enough to have access to, you know, the clinical assets and the research assets of the health system, and that serves as a wonderful validator for them.
Hi, Kevin Keller from Executive Healthcare. I had a question sort of overall for the center, or maybe for the accelerator itself. It seems like you have an incredible opportunity to sort of push all these small companies that you're going to use in the accelerator to literally start building on an API that's specific for the Inova Center. I mean, it seems like a really unique opportunity to find a bunch of different small companies that fit in with your plan, but to be ahead of the curve so that they all are interoperable, they all are communicating. I'm just wondering, is that a vision of where you're heading?
Yeah, great observation, and you're right on the mark. Excuse me, pollen season. One of the things that we think is extremely valuable in engaging with an early stage company is to help them go through their development process in a manner where it's relevant to how we would use it in Inova, but it's also relevant to how other health systems would use it. So, you know, we want to have a hand in the design of the final product as it moves through its development process, but we don't want to have such a heavy hand that it's only useful for us. The goal here is to build companies that, you know, under their own momentum and their merit are sustainable, productive, net income generating companies that will allow us to see, you know, a gain based on our work with that company, but allow us to work with a product that has been tailored to the needs that we have. And by engaging early on in the design process, it's easy to take a concept that, you know, in an isolated theoretical environment is beautiful and perfect, but when placed in the constructs of an operating environment, is flawed because it doesn't fit the workflow, or it doesn't fit the EHR, or it doesn't fit the security standard, and mold it so that those connections are made. I mean, you use the term APIs, and I think that's a perfect example. Where we are with electronic health record systems now, there are these large applications that have to have special purpose analytics written against them, but right on the horizon is the next generation of application that's going to need to talk directly with those EHRs. Functionality specific to physical therapy, functionality specific to urgent care. And as those applications evolve, they definitely need to have APIs that interface directly with the Epics and Cerners of the world. So, wonderful observation.
So last question for both of you. I'd like to get your thoughts on, look out over the next 36 months to 2 years, and what do you see in terms of technology companies in the region? What do you see in terms of needs of the healthcare system, and kind of where do you see things headed?
No, I'll spike the punch a little bit here and tell you what I'd like to see. I'm very interested in machine-based learning, as everyone is. But let me drill down a little bit deeper for you. The notion of machine-based learning, as it's applied to a specific discipline, I think has real relevance for healthcare. And the disciplines that we're looking at right now are imaging and pathology. Imaging, because the shadows associated with imaging can create variability in a radiologist and a pathologist determination as they look at either slides or radiographs that are there. And we believe that, given the proper size of a set, that a machine can, through attended and unattended learning, actually reach a point where it can identify, precancerous lesions or, bacteriophage or something that the human eye has a hard time actually seeing, or that the human eye would see maybe for the first 13 times that day, but for the 14th time, fatigue starts to set in. And so there are these augmentation capabilities that can happen in diagnostics that machine-based learning can accelerate and perform. The real challenge with this technology, though, is being able to get it smart enough so that physicians can count on it as doing something. And this creates an intersection that's very unique for the FDA because it's software as a device. It is software that's actually performing a diagnostic capability, and in that case, it has to be proven from an efficacy standpoint that it can actually do this. So we're very interested in seeing things that move in that category, and I actually think this region is wonderful to be able to develop those type of applications because it's strength in math and engineering and computational skills that can be and have been applied to satellite-based imagery and other areas. It's a ripe opportunity. And we also see emergence in both genomics and genetics and how those sciences can be applied both for disease identification, but also the propensity for your ability to metabolize pharmaceuticals and other areas. So those are very promising as well.
Yeah, I think at a couple of thoughts at a macro level. At a macro level, I'd love to see this region become known nationally and globally as really leading the disruption in healthcare, the positive disruption in healthcare that needs to happen. Costs have to come down. I love baseball, so I think this is the top of the first inning in terms of the disruption, not only the cost of healthcare, but also very importantly, scientific discovery. The work that we're doing in our genomics laboratory and how we apply that clinically to make sure you get the right drug, the right dose in that drug, and to have no toxicity. That's really important for not only your health, but from a cost standpoint, the ability to use and apply targeted therapeutics for patient care to cure disease. I think those are all exciting areas. But to have this region known as really leading the positive disruption in healthcare, I think would be really exciting. Not related to healthcare, but I think it is related to healthcare, the disruption comment. I think one of the great things for this region would be an Amazon decision to come here. And it's not because the 50,000 jobs and all the other things, it's because we have a lot of B2B, a lot of B2G, but not recognizable B2C, business to consumer entities within this region. And I think it's important as you compete for talent nationally and internationally to have all the infrastructure and institutions and such, but you also have to have a little bit of the cool factor. And there's some other places, I think, in the country and the world that have a little bit more cool factor right now than we do. And so I think that would definitely help the cool factor. And Amazon is a disruptor. And I think Amazon and others that have not traditionally been in healthcare are going to lead the way in disruption in healthcare. I had somebody recently say to me, he said, when you think about healthcare, he said, or they said to me, they said, who's the largest taxi cab company in the world? I said, it's Uber. I said, how many assets do they own? None. Who's the largest lodging company in the world? It's Airbnb. How many assets do they own? None. Who's the largest content provider in the world? It's Facebook. How much content do they create? None. Well, then you look at healthcare, right? We got to own everything. We build big buildings. We have all things. So I think lots of industries have been really disrupted. Healthcare has not. And so us, for this region to lead in disruption in healthcare as a national global leader, I think would be exciting. To do that, we're going to have to behave differently. I mean, that ocean's going to have to shrink and become more like a creek, because we're going to have to work across boundaries, and not just geographically, but we're going to have to work better with partnerships. When you think about Boston, you think about the Valley, you think about the strengths that are out there. We've got to leverage our assets, and we have some unique assets in this region, such as the federal assets related to health. We have great healthcare capacity. We have great technology capacity. We're going to have to work a lot more closely together if we want to become that national and global leader in the disruption of healthcare. And to me, that's really exciting. And you know, as it relates to this campus, we'd like to be a big, important part of that, and really be an organization that draws people together in these partnerships that most importantly transform lives, because that's the business we're in. We're in the business to improve the human condition, and how we do that with technology and apply that, and how we do that in partnership with others. I think that's an exciting story that still has many chapters to be written, and I think we all have an opportunity to be a part of that exciting opportunity.
Thank you.
Well, again, thank you for rounding out the afternoon. To our final keynotes, Todd, Pete, and Kelly, thank you. We want to acknowledge again Venable as our sponsor for that keynote. And as I wrap up, I want to thank again my fellow steering committee members who pulled together, I think, a fantastic conference today. The keynote speakers, the panel topics, the panelists themselves. So again, a tremendous job from that committee. Thank you. As I mentioned a couple of times today, NVTC, with the important programs that it runs, specifically for sponsoring us in the health industry today.